Yeah, you mentioned. I think that also is so important. I think the nostalgic feeling of like these shows and watching it together as a group. And I'll touch on it a little bit later on. But like watching it together as a group is such a kind of like enriching experience. But I think it's also cool because it shows something. There's a distinction between anime and like the animation and like the style versus also even the storytelling versus the Western animation. Talk to me about like that. Obviously, you've seen Western animation before, but what was it made it different from what you've seen before?
Okay, so you've got to think about it like this. Anime was inspired by the cartoons of the past. So we're talking MGM, Tom and Jerry, Warner Brothers with Looney Tunes, right? So a lot of the classic animation styles that we get from our anime now were from these classic cartoons like Betty Boop and stuff. Because what they were doing at the time were revolutionary, like different rotoscoping, how characters emote, different techniques and movements, and like motion capture and things like that. So a lot of the stuff from the Western world transferred to Japan was a different, a big boom, so to say. Like, let's think about it like this. So look at Astro Boy, right? One of the most influential animes of all time by
Probably
Osama.
the most influential anime
I
of
mean,
all
it
time.
was the first anime from recollection from in Japan history to get a TV series by Toei Animation, but also by Osamu Tezuka himself, who made his own animation studio because he felt like all the animes were very stiff and and all this stuff. Osamu Tezuka wanted to go big, so he wanted to go big. So he made Astro Boy as like the test pilot, and then that blew up in Japan. And then Astro Boy became like an international success in the late 80s
Let's talk
and
about that.
90s.
Yeah, because I know you have some knowledge here. Why? What made Astro Boy so internationally successful?
I think what made Astro Boy successful, I think it was like childlike wonder. Astro was like a kid, or Atom in Japan. He was like a kid like everybody else, exploring the world, childhood wonder, what the world was like. Then you got Professor O'Shea teaching Astro Boy the meaning of life and how things work. Then you've got his assistant, which basically he's like, Astro Boy should be destroying the world and doing destroying things, and not like robots don't have feelings and things like that. So Astro Boy's plots are more about Astro Boy learning about the meaning of the world, but also trying to struggle like, what's it mean to be a real person? Sort of like Pinocchio. It's basically classic Pinocchio, but turned into an anime instead, and making it more grounded, so to say, but a
You,
childlike
you know what's
wonder.
so fascinating too? Because like you say, like, obviously they're inspired by these cartoons, and I think a lot of these cartoons that we grew up on for children were just for children, and they had like children themes. But with anime, there was a shift where they were like for children animation, but they had such like adult themes that they would explore.
But actually, to cut you off there, a lot of these shows that the Western world used to watch, like Tom and Jerry, they were adults. They were made for adults. So the Japanese took that and thought, we could do the same exact thing, but let's expand on that. Let's go deeper than that,
Yeah,
rather than the slapstick adult humor, sort of like Tex Avery droopy kind of thing.
yeah, I think that's what I mean. I think it's like they
Yeah.
expanded on these adult themes and made it more explicit for
Yes.
people to actually understand. You know, you mentioned Astro Boy. He was dealing with like mortality, what it means to be human, like all these things that were like kind of, if you as a kid, you might understand these concepts, but they showed it in a way which made you kind of very much have to deal with it. Talk to
Exactly.
me about how you think animation or anime, for example, kind of like deals with these themes that were like obviously a little bit outside of our understanding, outside of our world as a kid. You know, I'm talking about isolation with like Naruto, or like
Okay.
transformation, or like all these different themes of like death and like feeling like disassociated from your community. But like these are like shonen characters having to deal with this. You know, so it was like that kind of like excitement as a kid where you're watching these
hmm
characters who are obviously dealing with more than this than meets the eye, but then you having to come to terms with these kind of themes yourself.
Well, first off, I want to just elaborate on your point that you just said just now. A lot of the shonen or a lot of the anime stuff we like are actually based on classical Japanese stories. So we're talking about Musashi, one of the most famous Japanese novels of all time. So talking about the philosophy of what it means to be a swordsman, what it means, the meaning of life, and how we dissect meaning through our own different perspectives of cultures, right? A lot of these themes are coming from folklore stories that came out from time, so like Princess Kaguya, Monotaro, like all these classic tropes that we see in shonen, even in Ultimate Muscle to a certain extent.
Shout out Ultimate Muscle.
So
Sorry.
we it all comes from classic Japanese literature and even literature from even back then, like Frankenstein or like Wuthering Heights and all these classic novels. Like they're taking aspects of these things that were already adult and dark, but we're elevating those themes even more. Like with Naruto, right? Takes classic ninja stuff, like classic ninja stories, but elevating that history, but transforming it in a way that people could be like, oh, ninjas. Ninjas do things, they work for lords, and sort of like Naruto goes in that lord ninja hierarchy, right? You're working for a daimyo, you're a ninja, you're doing ninja stuff missions, and you're trying to protect your lord, right? It's kind of similar in that way. Or like with Dragon Ball, Journey of the West, classic Chinese novel, right? Goku learning about what it means to be patient, the journey. You're learning about Goku growing as an individual, as a fighter, but also what it means to be a hero or a neutral outsider in a world that is very tangled and complicated.
That's so fascinating because you're right, and actually let's
Yeah.
linger on this point for a bit because you are right. They're taking literally the themes from these classic shows that have been going on for, or like classic novels or stories that have been going on for so long, and they're applying it to these shows and kind of reinventing them to make something new for a new audience. What do you think? Why do you think they're so successful with those kind of like reinvention? Is it because people genuinely know that these stories hold truth? They hold like some like core truths. You know, you talk about Journey of the West, about patience. Do you think people like Dragon Ball because the idea of patience, even if it's not explicit in the show, is something we can all relate to?
I think that's a lot of people, the reason why I got into anime, or a lot of people are, and even in the community, we are these characters at some point. We're going through stages of life, stages of grief and things like that. Cowboy Bebop with like Spike going over his past and identity and things like that, and then coming over with that past and trying to reconcile with it, but at the same time, really, he doesn't know how to get out of it. I think the reason why we like anime so much, and classic cartoons to a certain extent, they're just timeless. You can't replace a timeless thing.
100%.
Like Tom and Jerry, the reason why it's timeless because of the slapstick. But the reason why the slapstick worked because they didn't do it. That's all it was. It wasn't complex. It was a simple idea. But that's what made it timeless in the first place. Or let's take another example with Bleach. In terms of Bleach, it is very, very simple, right? But when you look into it, like the meaning of death, mortality, and things like that, and what Indigo has to go through throughout the entire series and in the 1,000-Year Blood War, you really start to see the themes peel off. And especially with other shonens, right? With like Jujutsu Kaisen, a modern another example. It's basically modern Hunter x Hunter. But let's try and take Hunter x Hunter and make it even more darker than it already was, in a way.
Darker than Hunter. Okay, we'll get into that later. Okay, I don't want to interrupt. I don't want to start going back and forth.
Sure.
So, but we'll get into that because I do want to talk about how these shows, like, kind of like build on each other and like the themes and stuff like that.
Sure.
But you were mentioning something about me thinking about how, moving from the ideas of like how these shows can come about and how we were interested in them to kind of more the complexity of them and like how these stories are told different. So firstly, talk to me about. What have you noticed about the pacing in anime? How the stories are different? How we have longer arcs, abrupt shift in tone, and like, just like like sometimes you get a slow burner, a few arcs where it's kind of like filler episodes, and then boom, some crazy stuff happens and it kind of shifts. Talk to me about how these like stories are told in such a unique and different way and why they grab us so like vividly.
For me personally, from a personal perspective, the reason why we gravitate to these stories is because they are aspects of real life. From a philosophical and, deeper mind sort of way, the reason why we gravitate towards anime a lot is basically an aspect of us from a human perspective. Because you got to think about it like this. Let's take another example, right? Cowboy Bebop talks about the theme of being an adult, learning through and going through all these things and the psychology behind that. But what makes anime so fascinating to me is that it's taking all the things that we liked, like Tom and Jerry, but elevating it, like I said. But in a way, or as I like to put it, anime just hits different. There is just something good about it. The reason why we gravitate towards it, the designs are always the factor. Then, if we like that character so much, we dig into it. Say like I know I talked about Bleach in the past for previous episodes,
Mm.
but the reason why I like that Bleach character design so much, personally, on a personal level, is that it's an, I don't know, Kubo has this rule of cool, like characters can be normal and some characters can be weird, right? Indigo is like this normal teenager going through normal teenage stuff. Because I was like Indigo, not like Indigo per se, but I was going through stuff, trying to figure out life, trying to figure out things. But you have the group, like yourself, Kieran, and all that stuff. We're like the anime guys, we're just chilling, we're doing our thing. So we're having our own anime adventures. But the reason why a lot of young people and even in the anime community are still active today is because these stories are powerful, man.
Yeah, and I want to focus on like what makes them powerful. 'Cause I completely agree with you. I think anime is like one of the new and almost like I call them myths for the modern era because they are like these stories are myths that I guess like the ancient civilizations grew up on. Anime is
It's
our
not
version
just
of it.
myths though.
Not
They're,
myths as in like
they're
like
sort of adaptations of what was great before. They're sort of like storybooks, but even more detailed with philosophy
I think
and
when I
deeper
when I
themes.
say myths, I'm not saying in terms of like they're fake. I'm saying in terms of just how myths in the past were some things we would learn from, like some things that we would like the stories we would tell people,
Right,
children, whatever, to learn from and take pieces of it and to
right, right.
continue going forward. On that topic, actually, then, what is the talk to me about some of the characters? I want to focus on a little bit, delve deeper, more from the overall view of it to now be more minute. Talk to me about some of the complex characters. Who's your favorite complex character in anime and why?